Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022, we have seen a slew of sanctions thrown against the country. The idea of the sanctions is supposed to cripple Russia's war chest so that they cannot continue to engage in a military activity in Ukraine. Now, we've seen ban against a lot of goods from Russia. A lot of Russian businesses have been sanctioned, individuals. And so, one of the biggest things that have been the conversation has been revolving around is sanctioning Russian diamonds. So, it was supposed to kick off in this year in January, but um certain things happened that is stalled. So 2 weeks ago, there was an event in Paris with the idea of setting up vaccine plants across Africa so that in case there is any pandemic, Africa can be able to produce their own vaccines. I'm not going to talk about that project today, but I'm just highlighting it because during that event, the president of Botswana, Maisisi, met with on the sidelines with France 24 TV station, and they had a conversation. And one of the things they discussed about was the sanctions against Russian diamonds and how it affects Botswana and African countries in general. So apparently, a few months ago, after the sanctions were supposed to kick off, and then I believe the diamond industry was pushing back against that a bit, but the president of Botswana, Masisi, along with Namibia and Angola, they wrote a letter to the G7 saying that it shouldn't proceed. Because let me tell you why. Now, the idea of that sanction against Russia, or Russian diamonds, is supposed to, it required that any diamond sold within the G7 countries would have to pass through Antwerp in Belgium for certification. Interesting. So Botswana, the government of Botswana, Namibia, and Angola pushed back against it because they said this is I'm looking for a really nice word. This is disrespectful to them because they are the producers of this diamond. So you cannot go. Interestingly, let me not forget. So this was set in place without consulting diamond producers. You want to, the idea is to sanction Russia, okay, but you're not sanctioning Namibia, you're not sanctioning Angola, you're not sanctioning Botswana. But then this policy directly affects not just even these countries in Africa, but also countries like India that is known for polishing diamonds and the UAE. So this letter was sent from Africa to the G7, stating that it's I'm paraphrasing, but it's disrespectful that they weren't considered and blah blah blah. So it made me begin to think of the current structure of the global economy. I thought it was quite interesting that a country like Belgium that does not have diamonds is set up to this policy, this G7 policy, was propping Belgium up to be the determinant of which diamonds go into, in effect, go into the market. Quite right, it's just the G7 market, but we also know that the G7 countries are very influential and they are financially buoyant. They're quite rich. They are very rich countries, so everybody wants to break into that market. Now, how is it that a country like Belgium will decide which diamonds go into the global supply chain without the consultation of the diamond producers? For example, a country like Botswana, Botswana's income has skyrocketed in the past decades. In fact, it's one of the high income, it's not generally high income on a global stage, but within Africa, it's one of the high income countries on the continent. And this is primarily due to diamonds. This is primarily due to diamonds. And in fact, Botswana is a very good example of how a country's natural resources can benefit the people and the country at large. So this is primarily due to diamonds. So if the G7 would proceed with this sanctioning diamond and Russian diamonds, which secondarily would sanction other producers, if the G7 proceeds with this, it's going to affect Botswana's economy as well as that of Angola and Namibia. So that was why they sent out this letter. So I began to think about the state of Africa, not just Africa really, but the way the global economy is positioned with respect to Africa. Now, I have a question. Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? That was one of the questions that was running through my mind. Because if the G7 can so easily, like that, with one policy, strangulate the economy of Botswana, or at least really, really give a heavy dent to the economy of Botswana that is primarily focused on diamonds, and countries like Angola and Namibia. What else is imbalance in our global system? What else is imbalance in our global system? Because yes, like I mentioned earlier, the G7, they have heavy purchasing power. So we, of course, Africa wants to sell our resources to other countries, particularly United States, Europe, and the rest of them. But if they can so easily give it such a dent to our economy, so don't you think that it's important for we in Africa to begin to think of creating alternative markets, particularly within the continent? Now, speaking of sanctions against Russia, we all know that Russia has received thousands of sanctions, tens of thousands of sanctions, maybe even at this point, maybe even 1 million, maybe even 1 million sanctions. So we already know that. But regardless of all the sanctions that have been thrown against Russia, Russia's economy is growing. This year, we saw that on a purchasing power parity basis, Russia is the number one economy in Europe. That means Russia has outperformed even Japan. It's number four in the world now. So on a PPP basis, it's China, United States, India, and Russia. So Russia has outperformed Germany. It has outperformed Japan. Other than that, also this year, last week or 2 weeks ago, the World Bank, was it either the World Bank or the IMF, one of the two, I can't remember which one, but has increased Russia's standing and saying that today Russia is now a high income country. Russia is no longer a middle income country. Russia has been a middle income country for a very long time, but as at this 2024, it's now a high income country. This is in spite of sanctions. So how was Russia able to should I how was Russia able to defeat these sanctions, these economic sanctions? Because Russia found other buyers of its of its goods and services. When Europe said we're not going to buy Russian oil, although they are still quietly buying Russia's oil, but when Europe said we're no longer going to buy Russia's oil and Russia's gas, Russia found a market in India. Russia found a market in China. Interestingly, India buys Russia. India will buy Russia's oil, refine it, and sell it to Europe. At, at, and sell it to Europe at a lot more expensive rate. Europe buys it. So what I'm saying is that one of the reasons Russia was able to defeat the sanctions thrown at it was because Russia found alternative sources or alternative markets to buy its products. Coming back to Africa, as the world is changing and things are quickly shifting, Africa, we also need to keep in mind that we need to create alternative market sources. Yes, at the end of the day, we still want to sell our goods to Europe and United States and Canada and Latin America, everywhere around the world. But we still need a healthy market within the continent. Shamefully, our trade within the countries of Africa, I think it's about 20% or less, the lowest in the world. Look at Europe. Europe is trading within themselves. European countries are trading within themselves to almost 80%. In Latin America, it's a heavy, heavy, heavy fraction of their trade. But in Africa, our trade is more with outsiders than it is within ourselves. So these are the things that I'm seeing. And one of the things that was coming to my mind when I was listening to that interview, President Masisi's interview with France 24, is that in as much as we want to sell our goods and services to countries outside of the continent, we also need to increase trade within ourselves. If for some reason Nigeria offends the G7 and the G7 says they're not going to buy Nigeria's oil, that that is a heavy blow to Nigeria's economy. A very terrible blow to Nigeria's economy. But if Nigeria was also had a healthy market within the continent, even if the G7 says they're not going to buy Nigeria's oil, this is I'm not saying that G7 says it's not going to buy Nigeria's oil. This is just me giving a hypothetical situation. But if, in that situation, even if the G7 says they're not going to buy Nigeria's oil, it may give a dent. But because Nigeria already has a healthy market within the continent, Nigeria can still earn sensible revenue because of the other people it trades with. Do you get where I'm coming from with this? It reminds me of something that happened with cocoa. So we already know that Ghana, Ivory Coast, two of the top producers of cocoa in the world. So cocoa is cacao. Cacao. That's what you used to calling cocoa. So cacao is one of their major exports, right? So the farmers who produce this cacao, compared to the global supply chain and how much the industry is actually worth, they make pennies. And I think this is also part of the residue of colonialism, where Africa was just used for as a natural resource extraction point, where they extract natural resources. But anyway, the farmers make pennies, almost nothing, compared to how much the global cacao industry is, how much it's worth. So the government of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire decided to do something about it and said, okay, they created a benchmark. We're trying to determine the price of the cacao going to for export to the global supply chain. Now that price they put was recognized for some while, for some time. Then after a while, the international buyers started buying cacao from those countries below that price, and the government couldn't really do anything about it because if they try to enforce that, and these outside buyers say okay they are not going to buy, that means the farmers are left with this cacao, no buyer. Do you get where I'm coming from? So at the end of the day, that also affects the economy and the output of those countries. So when the international players began to buy it less than the price that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, the governments of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire enforced or tried to enforce, the government really couldn't do anything because you can't say no, don't sell. If you say no, don't sell, who are you going to sell to? I get I guess you see where I'm coming with this. What are you going to sell to? The international players say they're not going to buy at say 2 cents. You say, oh, it has to be 2 cents. The international buyers say no, they're going to buy it at 1 cent. You insist 2 cents. They say okay, they'll go to Indonesia or some other places to buy this thing. If they go to Indonesia and other places to buy at 1 cent, you're left with your product. And because you don't have any other place to sell these things, you're the bigger loser. So I've been really thinking, and I realized that Africa needs to have a healthy market for this many of our products. We need a healthy market within the continent. We need to have businesses within the continent that can buy our resources, at least cushion, help give, you know, offer a cushion in case outsiders decide to do anything. It won't hurt us so much where we know that we can still sell within the continent. We need more businesses that can come on the scene to become heavy players in respective industry, especially industries that use our minerals. So for example, why can't we have a lot of industries within Africa who use diamonds? So Botswana not just selling to the G7 countries, Botswana will also sell to other Botswana, Angola, Zambia would also sell to Namibia, not Zambia, Namibia would also sell to other African countries who have heavy industries that need diamonds. We also need big jewelers, people who create amazing high jewelry using our diamonds, using our sapphires, using our emeralds. Zambia emeralds are one of the most beautiful emeralds in the world. Nigeria has the second best sapphires in the world. We need businesses that will use these things because at the end of the day, it not only benefits us, meaning that we can have alternative markets, but it also adds to the economy of the respective countries and the continents at large. So instead of exporting just natural resources, we are creating finished goods. Say, let's use the jewelry industry as an example. Instead of exporting gemstones, because many African countries they even export rough gemstones, not even polished gemstones. I'm going to give you an example. India, look at India. For a very long time, Antwerp was the center of the diamond industry in the world. But now India has taken over. India is now the center of the diamond trade, especially for polishing diamonds. Then Dubai is the center for trading diamonds. It used to be Antwerp. It's not Antwerp anymore, to the best of my knowledge. I'll check that just in case I'm wrong. But it's not Antwerp, to the best of my knowledge. It's not Antwerp anymore. India has come on the scene because India has diamonds. In fact, before the discovery of diamonds in South Africa in the 1800s, India was the place people went to get diamonds. But for many years, or even centuries, They used India as a place to just go and get it. Until now that India is asserting itself as a global player for polished diamonds. Not just diamonds, polished gemstones in general. How much has that added to India's economy? Billions of dollars. So you see why India is worth trillions of dollars? Because all these areas are places you can extract good money from. So bringing it back to Africa, instead of Africa to be a place to just take rough diamonds to the global market and then have it polished in Antwerp or have it polished in India and sold in Dubai, let us begin to and it doesn't really. I know sometimes we say it has to it's our governments are dragging their feet and all of that. Well, I really don't think it so much has to do with the government as it has to do with the people. India, as an example, the catalyst for asserting India as a dominant place for polishing diamonds wasn't so much with a lot of efforts from the government. It actually took the people themselves. The people themselves, because there was a documentary I watched some years ago. No, it wasn't years ago. It was actually it wasn't that far. I think it was 2022. I watched or 2023. I watched that documentary, and the documentary tried to it showed how India became such, and it has. I'm so impressed with what India has done. How India became a formidable player in the diamond industry. It just was some Indians in Antwerp, and they saw that Antwerp was a place for polishing diamonds. So India went there. These Indians were already in Antwerp polishing diamonds, but then they realized that these players in Antwerp were more focused on big diamonds compared to Melee, like tiny, tiny. They call it diamond dust or diamond sand or Melee diamonds. So those are the smaller ones. So these guys decided to start polishing smaller diamonds, and they were even polishing smaller diamonds in Antwerp. They took it to India and they called their really like not really related, but people within from that community called them. They taught them how to polish diamonds. They brought the what's the word, the equipment needed. They brought the knowledge and had the people do it. So they continue doing the big ones in Antwerp. But when people say, "Oh, we want to polish and we want to polish diamonds and it's small one," they would direct them to India. So that was how India got into the global supply chain. So these are the way we need to begin to think in Africa. Quite all right, you can say, "Oh, our governments are not serious, blah 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 blah." Okay, we as individuals, what are we doing? What are we doing? Let's look at this diamond thing. Imagine if the G7, because it's supposed to take effect, this G7 diamond ban, they gave themselves a timeline to take effect from the 1st of September 2024. So we are still some months away, 2 months away to be precise. So if this kind of thing takes effect, what kind of damage will it do to Botswana? Because Botswana, this letter they sent to the G7, they haven't gotten a response. What if they don't get a response and the G7 proceeds with this thing? Africa is damaged. Africa is hurt. Look at Botswana that was coming out of poverty thanks to their diamonds. This would then impede their growth. So, like I said, we need to begin to think differently. We need to begin to think differently. What can we do as a continent to use our natural resources for our own benefit? How can we create markets within the continent? Right? How can we create markets within the continent to cushion the effects of anything external players may decide to do? We need more businesses. We need more heavy funded businesses to come into to come into the supply chain of of our minerals and our resources. For example, we need more businesses within the cocoa industry. Why can't we have more businesses producing chocolates so that we are not so reliant on outsiders, on Cadbury, on Mars, on Hershey's? Right now, they are the biggest players, but we can give ourselves a target 20 years. By 20 years, we should be able to have like three businesses in Africa that can really say, okay, we are buying a large chunk of whatever is produced in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, in Nigeria, because Nigeria also produces cocoa. I think Nigeria is number 4 in the world. Yes, number 4, number 5 in the world. So we can begin to use, we need more businesses who are going to use our resources. We need more businesses who are going to use our diamonds. We need more businesses who are going to use our oil, who are going to use our cobalt and the rest of them. So this is where I want us to begin to think. You as you're watching me now, what can you do? Which area can you get into? How can you structure your business so that what we have in Africa can benefit we in Africa, regardless of what outsiders decide to do?